Here to discuss that Supreme Court ruling, we have Dr. Larry Jacobs from the Humphrey Institute. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
I do want to ask you right off the top, in your opinion, how does that ruling affect the landscape of campaigns?
Well, it looks like it's going to have a huge impact, as a lot of us suspected, in two different ways. One is that money is now going to be the gateway to having supercharged voice. If you're able to cough in $100,000 or $1 million, your voice is going to be a lot louder and more persistent than us voters out there who just have a ballot to cast. The other part of it, of course, is whether it balances or whether it tilts the battle for elected office. And I think on that score, it's a more mixed outcome. In other words, we've seen in the last week that Target and some other Minnesota businesses have contributed to a Chamber of Commerce advertising campaign for gubernatorial Republican candidate Tom Emmer. But we've also got unions and liberal causes investing in anti-Emmer ads. And that kind of counteracting effect gives a bit more pause to, I think, some of the more cataclysmic conclusions about the Supreme Court ruling.
Well, let's talk about those proposed cataclysmic conclusions, as you just mentioned. Now, a May poll by NPR and the Humphrey Institute indicates Mark Dayton has a very strong lead over the other DFL candidates in the primary, and it also states that he has a strong lead over Emmer if he is to be that DFL, not as strong of a lead, but a strong enough lead. I believe it was 5 points if he is to be the DFL choice, the selection. Margaret Anderson Kelleher is in second, but there's about a 10% margin between her and Dayton. She's raised millions by taking special interest money. He, as we all know, is using a significant portion of his own money to fund his campaign. So if we use that poll as a benchmark, what does that say about the real impact of corporate dollars on campaigning?
Well, as I said, I think the corporate money, the union money, the money from the various partisans provides added voice for those who have it. If you're Matt Intenza, for instance, who's put in over $4 million into this campaign, he's been able to rocket his campaign from obscurity into real contention for the DFL primary. Mark Dayton, as you mentioned, has the personal wealth, and Margaret Anderson Kelleher has been able to pull together money from a variety of different interests out there. The key issue, I think, for figuring out whether this biases the system is whether it locks out voices. That is, if we had a candidate with absolutely no money, then we would say, hey, that may be unfair to that candidate. And I think there could well be third-party candidates or individuals thinking of running who don't have those resources. And so money now is a taller barrier to those voices that are not in the public square.
And what about the impact on corporations? Common Cause Minnesota stopped just short of saying that consumers could boycott a company if they were contributing to a political campaign that perhaps didn't fall in their political ideology. Do you think this could happen?
I was frankly surprised by the extent of the contributions by some of the Minnesota corporations. These contributions are drawing a lot of flack. And if you're a retailer, you rely for your bread and butter on drawing in as many customers as possible. So I think this has really highlighted potential vulnerability. We'll see if some of these Minnesota businesses continue to give, or if maybe they've kind of touched the third rail of retail and politics and decided they're not going to be quite as bold.
So is it a fair assessment then that perhaps there is an indirect result would be a little bit of balance?
Well, I think in the case of the gubernatorial race in Minnesota, because we are seeing the unions and liberals putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars to attack Emmer, and now we're seeing the Chamber of Commerce leading a group that's putting in money to help Emmer, there is a counterbalancing effect there. And so I think the concern that corporations could buy the governor's race so far doesn't appear to be supported.
Well, let's talk about the primary election. It is coming up shortly. Do you think moving the date up a month is going to have any impact on voter turnout?
Huge question. I wish I knew the answer to it. The big kind of challenge here is that we're in the sleepy month of August. And the question is, who's going to turn out, how many, and what kind of voters? Perhaps we're going to see some segment of the electorate that usually turns out in the fall, say seniors, having left the state to go somewhere cooler for these months, in which case, we might have different outcomes. And so I think this is an experiment to see if it makes a difference. So far, it appears that all the candidates are working very hard to turn out the vote. They're very optimistic on their ability to do it. In my sense, it probably won't be a whole lot different than what we've seen in the past.
Do you think there'll be a difference in the campaigning between the primary and the general election, given this additional month for the candidates who are selected to move forward?
I think we may well see some differences. It's going to allow the candidates to get better organized, perhaps to do some more fundraising. There was a kind of Charlie Chaplin sprinting around element to the way we did it before, because the candidates were chosen really into the fall. I mean, they really didn't get their campaigns going until late September, whereas they're now going to have, as you mentioned, at least a month in advance.
So, Dr. Jacobs, do you see any key issues that are bubbling up here as we head into the primary?
Well, clearly jobs is the dominant issue, and the budget deficit and the related issues of government spending and taxes are dominating the primary, and I think will dominate the general election. It's hard to remember a campaign that had as much desperation about it as this election season. You have a real sense that people are down and out, many folks being without a job for a number of months. Lots of Minnesotans are in a difficult housing situation, and that's really added to the urgency of some of the debates we're having. Some of the tangential issues that used to pop up about guns or other social issues just aren't playing this year, and I think that reflects the urgency of the moment.
Okay, Dr. Jacobs, we're out of time. Thank you very much for taking some time. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.